Hi everyone and welcome to another YouTube tutorial. Today we're going to be talking about arrays. So an array is simply a linear data structure which stores data of the same type in a contiguous memory. So the contiguous memory simply means it stores this data in the same memory location, like a block of the memory where all of this data is being stored. And we'll just also take the chance and learn records. So a record is also a data structure similar to the array. They both use a contiguous memory, but the record groups it groups variables or data of different data types. So we remember saying an array groups only variables of the same data type. Here we are saying that the record groups data of different data types. So operations that can happen on an array can read data, it can write data, and you can assign data to an array. So technically you simply use an array like a normal variable. So without any doubt, we are going to write a program, or we are going to write an algorithm using arrays. So we are going to write an algorithm which takes 5 numbers and is going to display these 5 numbers. So it just collects 5 random numbers from the user and displays these 5 random numbers. Now that we have a clean idea of what our algorithm does, then we can write this algorithm. So let's call our algorithm display numbers. Display numbers. The next thing we want to do is our variable. The variable we are going to be using here is an array, and this is how you define an array. The first thing is the array name. Let's call our array num, followed by the size of the array, 5. But well, this could be n or any number. Now, what is our array going to store? Array of integer. So the next variable we are going to need is going to be an index, for example I, in order to control our loop. That is another integer. Now we want to begin our program. So let's just write behind here, below, begin. Right, we're going to ask the user to enter 5 numbers. And these 5 numbers are going to be read and stored in an array. So we use a for loop for I from 1. That is because we want it to stand at 1. So in the first iteration, I would be 1, 2, 5, do. Now we want to read the value the user is storing. So read, this is the reading capability of an array, the array name, at what index? At the index of I, the first position 1. So actually an array looks something like this. So since we've declared our array as 5 size, so it's going to have like 5 rooms. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now during the first iteration where I will be 1, it's going to take whatsoever value the user inputs and stores it in here in the first room. During the second iteration, I would be 2 is going to take whatsoever value the user writes in and stores it in this room. The third iteration, so if in the first iteration the user enters 3, second 4, 5, 6, 7. So that's how it's going to work. During the fourth iteration, it's going to read the 6, and during the fifth iteration is going to read the 7. So that's kind of how an array functions. So we are reading this loop is going to run 5 times and it's going to end. So we want to end the for loop. Now we have read the numbers. So at this stage of the code, these numbers are stored in this array. Now we want to display these numbers for I from 1 to 5. Do. Now we want to write these elements. Right. So num at the index of I, comma, let's just put, I don't know, a space. Yeah, space will make it looks good. And for, well, let's say, well, the space doesn't place much of a deal, but I just wanted to have it there. So we want to end our loop, like just directly under the beginning. We want to end our block of code. And here, there's the code for how arrays work. So I believe you should have a clear understanding about arrays. Now let's go to a record. A record is simply a variable which uses a contiguous memory in order to store data of different types. Both arrays and record use contiguous memory, but they store an array stores data of the same type, whereas a record stores data of different types. Now, let's create an algorithm which would use a record in order to store data about a student. Then it's going to display this data. So now that we have a clear idea of what we are about to create, we create it. Algorithms name student. Now variable, the first and only variable we would need is a record. Record name, which is student. Well, the record name mustn't be the same as the algorithm name, but I just wanted mine to be the same, so you can make yours different, but well, I guess mine is already the same. Now the record keyword, then we have begin, so we actually begin the record. Now inside our record, we want to, a student will have a name that is a string of the student will have a matricle, and the student's matricle is simply integers. It can be a really long number, but they are integers. Now we want to end our record. Once we have end our record, we want to begin our algorithm. So we're going to write enter student name. Now we're going to read the name of our record, that is student dot the data in that record we want to collect, that is student dot name. This essence, it tells you that go into student, go into the memory location which is student, and inside this memory location which is student, the cells is exactly like the array. So this is like the memory location called student. This is like the memory location called student, and this student is broken into this. The first field is the name, and the second field is the matricle, and this field has data type string, and this field has data type integer. So that's simply the difference between an array and a record. So it's saying that locate this block of memory, and in this block of memory look for this field, and once you get this field, whatsoever data the user is entering, you should put that data in this field. This is simply what this dot means. So we have read it. Now write again enter students matricule. And read student dot matricule. And there it is. That's the no, we had to display these elements. Sorry about that. We had to display this, so we're just going to take this away, and we want to display the student name is student dot name, right? Comma, and the student matricule is, comma, student dot matricule. And in essence, there is the display message. So we have created, we have stored data in it, and we have displayed that data. Now, before we go to the next exercise, I want you to tell me something. So if we had, let's say, 5,000 students, would we have to manually create 5,000 student record in order to save this data, or there is another way to do it? So we're going to think of it, and I'll be expecting to hear your answers in the comments. Now, let's say we had 5,000 students, but 5,000 is too many. But let's say we had 3 students, and we want to still input their names, and we want to display their names as well as their matricule. How would our algorithm look like? So we start again. Now, before writing any algorithm, as I earlier said, we need to think exactly of the problem and of exactly how we want to solve this problem. So what do we know? We know we have an array, and that array can store data of the same type. And we know we have a record, and that record stores data of different types. Now, the array can only store homogeneous data, and the record, we don't want to be creating multiple records. So what if we create an array which stores these records? So an array of type record, or of type of the record. So here's what we want to do. The algorithm, we would call it multiple student. Multiple students. Now, our first variable is going to be I, which is an integer. We're going to use this variable in order to run through our loop. The next algorithm will be student. The next variable, and begin, just like we defined it above. We're going to have name, name data type is going to be a string. We are going to have matricule, data type integer. Now we want to end our record, and we want to create an array, and let's call this array students with an S. Students of size 1, let's just say 1 to n, right? Yeah, we want to create 3, but let's say we give the user the ability to create an array of the size he wants. So this, because arrays have fixed size, but you can define the size by asking the size from the user. So making it 3 is possible, but why make it limited? So let's just add a variable here called n. right? Such that from 1 to n, but our n will be 3 since from the beginning we said 3. So now array of data type student. Now this means that in this array, it means this array, so this is how it would look like. So this is an array called students, right, with an S, and inside this array can have n records. So n records, I don't know the exact amount, but well, I drew 4. Well, we decided it would be 3. So this array, when you say an array of students and a student is a record and this record has 2 fields, it means in this array 1 field should be separated into 2. Now the data type which is being stored in this field is the same, because all of these fields of the array is going to store one data type, and that data type is student. But this data type student can have 2 other data types, or you can have 2 other memory locations, which is this one and this one, which is the name and it is the matrix. Oh, I wrote integer here. Integer. Okay. Nice thing I saw it. Well, here, so this is how it looks like. So this is a string and this is an integer, and this is the record which is inside this array. And that is how we are going to store, like, I don't know the amount of students, but for us it's going to be 3. So let's continue. Now that we have defined all of our variables, we want to begin our algorithm. So notice here that we define the student data type before the array, because you cannot put the array of students and then you're defining the record below. That is incorrect. So you should take note of that. Now, okay, let's continue with our array. Okay, begin. So, right, how many students do you want to create? Or how many students info do you want to store? So we want to read. This is the variable n. And n is going to determine the size of the loop, which in our case would be 3. Now, the next thing we want to display is a message asking the user to enter the student's information. Enter student's info, short for information. Now, once we have this information, we don't want to enter this information manually. We don't want to have to store this information manually, so we could use a loop for I from 1 to n, where n is the size of our array, do. Now we want to write a message again. Alright. Enter student, comma, I, comma, name. Just this to make it classy. So essentially, I in the first iteration will be 1. So it's going to display enter student 1 name. Now we want to store it. Read. We are storing it in the array which is divided into record. So it's going to be students with an S at the index of what? I. That is students at the first memory location. Dot name. So that is where this data is being stored. We remember saying that one memory location in the array is divided into 2. One can house the name and the other can house the matrix. So we want another right line, right? enter student at the index of I again, but this time matricle. So it's still the first iteration, so I will still be 1. So this will be read as enter student 1 matricle. And we want to close that, semicolon at the end, and we read students, because students is the name of our record, at the index of I matricle. And this for loop is going to run for the size of n. So remember when I asked 500 students or 5,000 students? Well, here it is. So this will have 5,000 arrays which are further divided into subcells. Now we want to end for. And we want to write something like all students' informations were successfully collected. Or we want to say info collection completed. Well, the message depends on you since you're the one writing the algorithm. Completed. Good. Now we want to display the message. So we want to write displaying collected information. Now we want to use again another for loop for I from 1. For I from 1 to n. Do. But here is simply a write. Write student, comma, I, comma, name, student at the index of I dot name right student the index of I comma comma matricule comma student at the index of I dot matricule. And here, that's how you display all the messages. And 4. And now we can end our algorithm. So this is a basic algorithm. I hope it was of much help to you, and I hope I clearly explained how this works. So here, please don't forget to like and leave a comment. And if there is any basic algorithm, if there is any algorithm like you would want me to write, you could always drop a comment below, and if that comment gets enough likes, or if this video gets enough likes, I might consider writing the algorithm with the most likes. So with that, thanks for watching.